So in our today's session, we are going to cover something about SQL, and we would try to understand why a business analyst needs to know about SQL or databases. Now, as we are aware that as a business analyst, we would closely be working with technical stakeholders like the application developers or SQL developers or database developers. So why it goes important for a business analyst to know about databases? Now, imagine a scenario wherein you are working as a business analyst and you are asked to create a functional specification document. Now, the supporting document that you create along with your functional specification document could be your UI screen and mockup. Now, UI screen and mockup is something that is showing the front end of a particular system, how the system would look like to the end user. Now, when a user enters certain set of information from front end, how that information would flow through and make its way to databases is something that we should know as a business analyst. So UI screen and mockups would always show about the front end view of the system, but how we would ensure that the information or the operations that we are doing from a front end of a system is being connected to the backend of the system. That is the reason why we need to know about the databases and the relevant concepts in and around databases. Now, as a business analyst, we would often be creating artifacts like data dictionary, which should elaborate more about what we have created in the UI screen and mockup. For example, in UI screen, you have um, created a design wherein you are capturing the user information. For example, user's first name, user's middle name, or user's last name, their addresses, their contact numbers, their email address. These all information needs to be stored somewhere, and depending on the situation or depending on the scenario, we should be able to retrieve those information and validate it. For that reason, we need to store this information in one of the databases. Now, this databases can be your Microsoft SQL Server, could be your Oracle database, could be your MySQL, PostgreSQL, depending on the vendor that your project is using, the database and the concepts in and around that particular database would remain the same. So essentially, this activity is called as data modeling activity in the world of business analysis, wherein we try to map the data elements that has been captured from UI screen to the elements from the backend. And when it comes to process modeling of these data operations that we perform, we depict it with the help of a data flow diagram, wherein we identify all the data elements and how they would flow through the system. We elaborate on that particular part. So the agenda for today's session would be why a business analyst needs to know about databases, the databases and the types of databases, what are entity relationships in databases, what are keys in databases, what are normalization in databases, and how do we use SQL for databases along with some hands-on. Now this session is divided into three parts. So today is the first part of this particular session. Now why a business analyst needs to know about databases. So these are typical scenarios basis on which we could conclude that a business analyst should know about the databases. For example, the system your team would be developing will mostly use a relational database technology. So when we are working closely with our development team, they are coding some of the functionalities. Now, through their coding, they would be touch basing with the data elements of that particular application as well. Because ultimately, what's the outcome would be in the form of information. Now, what is information? Information is nothing but data. So we need to help them understand how the information would be stored, retrieved, or updated basis on the given scenario. So that is one reason why a business analyst should know about the databases. Now, we also create some of the artifacts as a business analyst called as data dictionary And we also create entity relationship diagrams documenting the relationship between the entities and the other elements in databases. For example, if you consider an order management system, so for every order, you would be maintaining a database table wherein all your order information would be stored. Now that order information would ultimately be linked to a customer who is placing that particular order. Now those customer information would be stored in a customer table. Now that customer would be having an address associated to it. Now this address could be your billing address, could be your communication address. There could be n number of addresses associated to a customer account. Now this customer account addresses would be stored on an address database. Similarly, we could have multiple entities in a particular project like order, customer address, customer demographic information, and how they are interrelated with each other is something that we would show in a typical entity relationship diagram. So the very first step is data dictionary, and from that data dictionary we would be creating entity relationship diagram. Now what is a data dictionary? Data dictionary is like whenever you are creating a user screen or user mockup, so what all information we are you know associating with that user screen or mockup should go in a particular data dictionary. For example, whether a text box should accept only alphabets or a text box should accept only numbers. For example, if you have shown a phone number filled in UI, so that phone number would ultimately be in the form of numbers. We cannot accept any alphabets over there. So that is something we need to show in data dictionary. Apart from that, if there are any validation that are enforced, for example, your phone number field cannot accept alphabets, so that's a validation. Your phone number field cannot exceed more than 10 digits, that's a validation. If your application is targeted towards US market, so your phone number should start with a US country code. If your application is targeted towards Indian market, the phone number would start from India's country code. So such validation and the business rule and the number of minimum and maximum characters, if there are any default value needed, so everything would be documented with the help of your data dictionary. So data dictionary is essentially a spreadsheet wherein you document all the data elements for that particular UI screen or mockup. And after that, you go about relating those tables with each other with the help of your entity relationship diagram. After entity relationship diagram, what you create? You create a data flow diagram. Then you create a physical schema or logical schema or conceptual schema. So these are some of the artifacts that we create as a business analyst when it comes to database modeling. Now we will benefit from querying database or database extract as part of our analysis of the current and future system. Now third pointer talks about irrespective of analyzing a particular system from a functional perspective. Let's say you are in a particular situation wherein you have to send out the progress of a particular project. Let's say you are working in an agile environment and you want to do a status reporting of your team member to your project manager or to your product owner. So how you would do? You cannot visit each and every individual user story. So what you would ultimately do? You would query a particular SQL statement in any of the requirement management tool, and you would create a database extract in the form of Excel spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet would show the progress of the project, like how many requirements has been developed or how many requirements are in pending clarification statuses or how many requirements are in requirements approval stage. Those all information would be provided in that particular Excel sheet. Now in order to query or create a report of that particular extract, we need to be first well versed with how to write some basic queries. So that is also a area wherein we would be using SQL queries to pull up a report. This report can be pulled with the help of Jira or Microsoft Team Foundation Server. So these requirement management tools are capable of supporting queries for your respective SQL counterparts. So they support querying of information in that particular requirement management tool itself. Coming to the fourth pointer, it talks about SQL can help us understand querying a new system during the testing phase. So if there is a testing involved in a particular given scenario, so if we know the SQL statement, we can validate it better from a testing perspective. We have validated end-to-end functionality. We have validated the front end of the system. We have validated the back end of the system. Now we have validated the middleware if there are any in that particular system. Now we need to validate that whatever we are inserting from front end, exact same information is coming to the back end or not. So how we can do that during testing? With the help of SQL skills. If we know how to query a particular table or a particular column or a particular record, it would be helpful for us to validate that particular piece of functionality in a better context. After that, if there are any automated system to do requirement management and testing, SQL will help us analyze the data in the system. Like I gave you an example of requirement management tool like Jira or Team Foundation Server. If we are querying some information out of that particular tool, then also SQL would be helpful for us. Then we can create small database to support prototyping. Now whatever we have seen is one category of prototyping, like we have seen throwaway prototyping, we have seen interactive prototyping. Now what's the next level in prototyping? To have some some kind of mini project for demonstration to the customer. Now if we are creating some mini project with basic CRUD operations, creating, retrieving, updating and deleting, in that context also our SQL skills would be helpful for us. That would give a realistic demonstration of the system to the business or the customers. If there are any mission critical systems that have requirements for business intelligence, understanding the flow of data from application to that goes into a data warehouse, or any analytical products that require knowledge of SQL or relational databases, then also the SQL skills would be helpful for a particular business analyst. So any project you say, it ultimately deals with information, and this information are in the form of databases. So it would be an understatement to say that a BA is not supposed to know about databases or SQL. A BA is supposed to know about SQL and databases, but to a certain extent. They are not expected to know the complex part of the databases, like writing a store procedure or creating a view or trigger. These are not something expected out of a business analyst. For these activities, we always have the SQL developers with us. But the basic a set of queries, like your CRUD operation queries, or your basic join queries, or your basic filtration queries, these are something a business analyst should know. He would be using it on a daily basis or on a day-to-day basis in a particular project. So if this thing are already known to a particular business analyst, he need not to reach out to the a particular developer or programmer and consume their bandwidth, because they are already occupied with some of their activities. So it's essential and it's always helpful that you know something about databases and write some of the basic SQL queries that would help us do our work better in a given context or situation. So these are something very common situation wherein a BA is supposed to know, or very common reason wherein a BA is supposed to know about databases and SQL. Now before beginning with databases, let us understand what are the types of databases, and before that we need to understand what is database. Now data, as I said, it's a collection of raw facts, or it's a collection of interrelated data, and base is something wherein we put this information. So data is nothing but your information, and base is where we store that information, and management is how we organize that information. So we have the information, we have the data, we have the base, we have the database, then we have the management of that particular data, like in the form of entities and relationships in a typical RDBMS context, that is a relational database management system. Now, what are system? The entire data can be stored in a systematic manner and how to maintain the system. Now, if you consider a SQL Server or Oracle, they are nothing but your database management system. Now, what this system are capable of? They are capable of facilitating all this three information: maintaining the information, providing a base wherein the user can store the information, and providing the management capabilities. For example, if we would like to query a particular piece of information from that particular database, we can do so. If we would like to add certain set of information to that particular database, we can do so. If we would like to do some additional operation like maintaining performance or scaling that particular database, or enforcing some security standards to that particular database, we can do so with the help of your database management system. So database is something that defines the data storage and relationship, and management system defines the entire maintenance. So they are two different independent activities, but they are always connected with each other and performed parallelly when it comes to management of a database system. Now this is how your database look like. We have the database at the bottom. Then we have a database management system like your SQL Server or Oracle. Then we have our own application programs. Application program could be any web application, Amazon, or for that matter, Netflix, or any application which connects you to the database with the help of your database management system. Now remember, your database is never visible to the front end system. This is something that goes to the back end, and management system is a visualization of your information or how you manage your information which is stored in the database. For example, if you want to see what are the titles for horror genre in Netflix, you simply query that particular database, that which are the horror titles that are available in Netflix database, or which are the comic titles that are available in Netflix database. You just query it. You don't see through the entire database and find each and every record. No, you just query it. Now this is something a database developer or a application developer would do. But what the end user would do, end user would be having different options in front end, wherein he can put filtration, like I would like to see which are the titles that are available under horror genre, or which are the titles that are available under comic genre. So how the end user would be able to do? He would connect to Netflix system via a computer or via a cell phone or via a laptop. He would access the Netflix UI, and from there he would put all those filtration, and the programming that have been enforced in that particular UI would ultimately call the database which is there in the backend. So this is an example of how things are separated. So we are separated with four different layers. The bottom layer, then comes the database management system layer, then comes the application program layer, and to the top are the end user layer who are accessing this particular system. Now we need to understand what are the operations in databases. So CRUD, creating a particular information, reading a particular information, updating a particular information, and deleting a particular information. So CRUD is the basic set of operation that anyone performs in a particular database table. So these are the basic set of operation that we perform in a database table. So when it comes to operation, we have a user, we have a database application, and we have a database. So user would always perform the CRUD operation using a database application like your SQL Server, and database is where all your information would be stored. So basis on the filtration criteria or the operation what he performs, the database application would show the result which it in return fetch from the database itself, where all your information is stored. Now, when we access a particular database engine, let's say a group of user is accessing a database engine. So what he is doing in the database application, he inputs all the information. Now, after all the information are input, the information goes to the database engine. Now that database engine translates those information into some code language. Now that code language goes to the actual database, where all your information are saved, and after retrieving those information, the process is reversed. It sends those information to this database engine in code format. Now this database engine again translates those information from code format to a format which is understood by the end user, and then end user is able to see those information in readable format. So database engine essentially does all the conversion. So irrespective of whatever application you say, whether it's an Oracle application, whether it's an SQL Server, PostgreSQL, MySQL, every this vendor would be having a database engine which would be converting information from regular queries to a code format, and again converting the code format stuff into your regular readable format. So whatever conversion thing is there, the database engine takes care of those conversion part. Now let us understand what are the types of databases. Now when you work in a typical database scenario, there are different types of databases that we encounter. Now why there are types of databases? So types of databases are purely driven by what information we store in a particular database. So we can store information in a plain textual format with the help of very simple rows and columns. Those are very simple type of databases. Now then there are databases wherein we store end-to-end XML. Now why we store end-to-end XML? Because the volume of information is so high that we cannot go on creating that many number of tables, rows and columns. So an ideal solution is to create an XML file and store it to the database. Then comes database wherein we store only references. Now why we do, why there is a need to store references? So imagine a site like YouTube. Now YouTube has n number of videos uploaded on a daily basis. The volume of videos that are uploaded on YouTube are in terabytes. Now, is it practically feasible to store this information in video file directly to the database? No. Why? Because when you are querying or when you click on play button, ultimately what you are doing, you are retrieving that information. Now, if imagine a scenario, you have stored terabytes of video files in a particular database. Now, when you click on play button on YouTube, imagine how much load it would put on the database server. In order to mitigate that, what we do essentially, we put references to that particular video file. Now video files would be stored separately with a unique ID. We just store the references in the database table. Whenever you click the play button in for watching a YouTube video, you are essentially pointing to that particular reference, and that particular reference in turn pointing to that video management site wherein all your videos are stored in that particular server, and that copy is being accessed via your internet and you are able to view that particular video. Now same case goes for Wikipedia. In Wikipedia we have lots of information. So do you think all those pages are stored in the form of tables and columns? No. A page would be stored in that particular context. Now this page could be in the format of an XML file, could be in any blob format uh, that is available depending on the available vendors like your SQL Server or Oracle. So similarly, depending on the nature of data, we have different types of databases. For example, if you see here, we have document oriented databases wherein a document oriented database is a computer program designed for storing, retrieving, and managing. In our regular scenario, we use a document oriented databases. Then we have an embedded databases. It consists of data developed by individual end user. Example of this are collection of document, spreadsheet, presentation, multimedia, and other files. So if the information is unable to be stored in the form of tables and columns, excuse me, we would be using embedded databases, which supports storing of information in the form of document, spreadsheet, presentation, multimedia, and other file formats. Then we have graphical databases. Now, graphical database is a kind of NoSQL databases that use graph structure with nodes, edges, and properties to represent and store information. Now, typically, if you consider a database like your Google Maps, now Google Maps essentially stores information in the graphical format, wherein you store the information in latitude and longitude format, depicting that particular area. So these maps are not the way it is visible to us. They are stored in latitude and longitude format. Depending on the coordinates that you pass, it creates a copy for you, and depending on your queries, it shows you that particular area's map. So those kind of database are called as your graphical databases. Then comes your hypertext databases. Your Wikipedia, your MSDN, your MSN are example of hypertext databases. Then comes your operational databases. So all your operation stuff goes in operational databases. For example, the order management system of Amazon website, that's an operational database which are actually used by the end customer. So that is one category of databases. Then comes your distributed databases. Now, what is distributed databases? Now, whenever you do a particular banking transaction, now it's not essential that all your banking transaction is stored in one particular server. It can be stored in any XYZ server. To a user, it may look like that if I performed a banking transaction in India, then all my transaction information would be stored on the server hosted in India. No, the case is not like that. It could be stored in a server which is located in Singapore, or it could be stored in a server which is located in UK, or it could be stored in a server which is located in Europe. To us, it seems like it is stored in India, but it can be stored on any XYZ server depending on the infrastructure. Now, they have set up their infrastructure in such a way that it is distributed in nature. So they act like single database, but they are distributed physically. Logically, they are same. They look like one single database, but physically they are distributed. So we cannot guarantee that which physical server has our information when we perform a typical transaction. So that is a scenario when we deal with distributed database. Then we have flat file database. So flat file database do not have any relationship as such. Whatever information you store in a typical notepad file, or anything that do not have any relationship associated with it, is termed as flat file databases. So if you have worked in a particular project wherein you have to send information of the automatic clearing houses, so those information are always stored in the form of flat files, essentially the notepad kind of file. Now then comes your life cycle of database. Now when we deal with databases, the database has to go through different life cycles. So these are the 8 phases in that particular life cycle of databases. It starts with a planning phase, followed by a requirement gathering phase. Then comes your conceptual design phase. Then comes your logical design phase. Then comes your physical design phase. Then construction phase, implementation and rollout phase, and ongoing support phase. The planning phase is where we plan around databases, how our database would look like in collaboration with the technical architects and the solution architect. Now, after we have done our planning, we go about requirement gathering in and around that particular planning. Now, during this requirement gathering, we produce our data dictionary and all this information. Now, first we would create a data dictionary, then the data flow diagram, then the supporting entity relationship diagram. After we have done all those things, we would go about conceptual design. Now, what is conceptual design? Conceptual design is a very high level view of the information that we would like to show in context with our data modeling activities as a business analyst. Now, after we have done conceptual design, we do the logical designing. Now, logical design is something that we need to do with the in collaboration with our development team or the SQL developers who are around us. Along with their help, we would be creating a logical design. And same thing goes for physical design. So every design that we explore on would uncover more detail about that particular set of information. So very high level view of information is conceptual design, followed by level deeper view of the information, that is logical design, and the very granular level design would be shown with the physical design. Now, these four things is something a business analyst is supposed to do when it comes to considering the accountabilities of a business analyst when it comes to data modeling. After that, construction is something they would design the database. Implementation and rollout would be something they would check the implementation and test out the system. And ongoing support is something once your database design is moved to the production environment and is operational, how do you go about supporting that particular operation? That is something you would do once you reach to this particular phase. So planning you would do in collaboration with your project manager and the respective technical stakeholder. Requirement gathering you have to do along with their consultation. So requirement gathering, conceptual design, logical design, and physical design. These are the four phases wherein there is a artifact that you have to produce as a business analyst. Rest, which are highlighted in white color, are something that would be done by someone else, not by you as a business analyst. Now, before moving to entity relationship diagram, this is how the things look like. When it comes to data dictionary, this is how your data dictionary look like. For example, you are creating a data dictionary for a particular vehicle. We will take an example of vehicle. Now, what all things a vehicle could be having? A VIN number, the year the vehicle was made, who had made that particular vehicle, the name of the company like Ford, Hyundai, Honda, whatever it is. What is the body type? Are there any other thing associated to it? What is the color of the vehicle? What is the weight of the vehicle? What is the engine power? What is the cylinder capacity? What is the maximum gross weight? Then what is the seating capacity? What is the odometer reading? What is the display make? What are axles? All those things would come as your field name. After that, you would be creating description around it. What does this field signifies for? After that, you would be creating what are the type of information that you would be accepting in that particular field. For example, if you consider weight, weight cannot be a character type. It would always be in numbers. So you would create a weight a thing or a column, sorry, a row in your particular data dictionary, and you would highlight it as an integer type. Now, when it comes to weight, what's the maximum number of digit you can consider in it? It's the maximum 6 digit, not beyond that. If you consider the power, it would be accepting 10 characters, and that has to be alphanumeric characters, not beyond that. If you consider an odometer reading, it would be in character, and it should consider 2 alphanumeric characters. If you consider a display, it would be an integer character, and it would only accept numeric character 5, 6, or 7. So these kind of specification you have to enforce when you are creating a data dictionary. And if there is a default value that you would like to do, for example, the numeric character 5, 6, or 7. So out of 5, 6, 7, is it a mandate that 5 would be default or 6 would be default or 7 would be default? If there are any defaulting requirement around it, then you would mention it in this particular column. Then you would be mentioning whether these information are optional or mandatory. If it is optional, you would mark required as no. If it is mandatory, you would mark required as yes. And then comes the uniqueness. Uniqueness is like it doesn't match to any other such information in that particular table. So every vehicle would be having a unique VIN number. No VIN number would be duplicated or would be repeated. So uniqueness depends on a factor which would be unique to that particular element. So in our case, for a particular vehicle, VIN number is unique. VIN number is something that won't be repeated or won't be duplicated. So we would assign that uniqueness as for that VIN as unique. Rest all things would be not unique. It can be duplicated. After that, we need to enforce some keys, primary keys, foreign keys. I'll come to that part in a while. So if there are any primary keys or foreign keys, then we have to show it on our data dictionary. So this is an example of just vehicle. What about the owner of the vehicle? So you have to do the same process for owner. What about the insurance details of that particular vehicle? So you have to repeat the same thing for that. What about the address of that particular owner? You have to do the same thing for that. Depending on the entity, you have to do the mapping from a data standpoint with the help of your data dictionary. So your vehicle, your owner, they are nothing but your entity. And the relationship that you maintain between this entity, between these entities are called as relationships or relating to a particular set of entities with the help of your entity relationship diagram. So how do you do that particular relationship? With the help of keys. So SQL or any database system provides the functionality to do a entity relationship diagram mapping. Now coming to the conceptual modeling. This is how your conceptual modeling looks like. This is the very high level view of your database um, relationship amongst the entities and the objects. So customer is an entity, what the customer would be able to do when it is connected to the vehicle entity. Now vehicle is an entity, what the vehicle and how it is related to a salesperson entity. Now salesperson entity, how it is related to DMV clerk entity. Now salesperson entity, how it is related to insurance representative. Now how insurance representative is related to the customer. This is something that we need to show with the help of conceptual modeling. It's a concept. It is not yet materialized. Okay. So this is the high level view. After that, you have created conceptual modeling, you go to the logical modeling. In logical modeling, it is a level deeper to the conceptual modeling, wherein you show what all information would be there and how they would be related to each other with the help of entity relationship diagram. So entity relationship diagram is a diagram that you create during your logical modeling phase. After that comes your physical modeling. So this is a phase wherein your data dictionary, your conceptual models, your logical model are referenced together and used by the development team to create a physical model. Now this physical model is something you would be assisting the development team to create, or in some projects a business analyst can also create this physical model. So depending on your skill sets and your confidence level, you can go about creating the physical model. Now what's the difference between logical model and physical model? So you could see that in physical model you have actually designed a particular table with the primary keys, foreign keys and the data types describing that particular table. You have also created the number of indexes required for that particular table, which is not present in logical model. So these are the four things that you create as a business analyst when it comes to database modeling. Now, what are entity relationships in databases? So if you consider entity, it's any real-time object, anything in a particular world. A pen, a pencil, a book, a fan, or a particular man, they are called as entity. Now, what are attributes? Attributes are the properties of that particular entity, like color, size, length, width, If you consider a particular pen would be having a color, it would be having a size, it would be having a length, a width. So that is nothing but the properties or attributes. Excuse me. Then it would come relationship, wherein we would maintain relationship between two entity sets, like how a pen is related to a book or how a pencil is related to a man. So this relationship we need to elaborate with the help of entity sets. We would be having different entities, and then we would be relating them with the help of entity relationship diagram. So there are different attribute types when it comes to entity relationship diagram. We have simple and composite attributes. For example, first name, middle name, and last name. These are example of simple and composite attributes. Then we have single and multi-valued attributes. For example, if we consider a contact number, now contact number would be having a country code, an area code, and a final number, which is actual contact number. So this is a multi-valued attribute. If you consider a contact number field in the UI, it is a combination of these three attributes: country code, area code, and number. Then together it would come as contact number. So this is not a simple one. Simple one is just your name, first name, middle name, last name. There is no such, you know, um, hard and fast rule enforced to it. But when it comes to this particular example wherein we have a country code, so we would be having a configuration table in our database wherein all the country code across the geographies would be stored, and all the area code depending on the country code chosen would be stored in the config file. So every time you enter a contact number, it lookups to that config file of that particular SQL database and picks the country code and area code and then asks you to enter your number. Now how it does how it does the selection of the country code and area code. So depending on the region from where you access that particular website, it uses localization technique, or the browser localizes some of the parameters of that particular application, and depending on that localization they come to know that which country you are accessing that particular website. So the same website that I access from India would set the country code as +91, and the same website when I access from US would set the country code as +1, and if accessed from elsewhere it would set something else. Now India and US is one thing. Now what about the area code? If I'm accessing the same website from Pune, the area code be 020. If I'm accessing the same website from Mumbai, the area code would be 022. If I'm accessing the same website from let's say Chennai, the area code be 044. So how the browser is knowing it? With the help of programming code that have been written. So this is something that is stored in the configuration database, and then we enter our number. So that's an example of multi-valued attribute. Then comes your derived attribute. So it can be computed from others. For example, age, date of birth. These are something that would be derived out of the person's information or demographic information. So this is how your entities and relationships looks like. These are some of the notation that you need to consider. So entity would always be shown with the help of rectangle, relationship with the diamond symbol, attribute with this ellipse shape, weak entity with the help of two rectangles, then weak entity relationship with the help of two diamond symbol, multi-valued attribute with two ellipse, key attribute with ellipse and a dash, and composite attribute with this particular symbol. And then we have this relationship: one to one, one to many, wherein many is mandatory, then many, then one to many, one to more, where more is mandatory, one and only one, which is mandatory, zero or one, where one is optional, zero or many, where many is optional. So these are the symbols that we use when we do a mapping. If you see, a company is with this relationship. Now what is this particular relationship? A line with dash one. One company can have many employees. So you could see this relationship, one to many. So one company can have many employees. Now, if you see this particular relationship, it talks about this particular part is 0 to 0 or many. So many employees can have 0 or many projects. So it depends on the scenario within a particular organization. One employee can be tagged to one particular project or two to three projects, or they cannot have a project at all. So depending on that particular situation, these all things is related to each other. The entities are related to each other: company, employee, and projects. This is a sample entity relationship diagram. This is an apparel size. This is a product. These are the product categories. These are product colors. These are color, and these are categories. So apparel size is an entity. Product is an entity. Product categories is an entity. Product colors, color, and categories are entities, and these are their attributes. So apparel size would be having a size ID attribute, a size code attribute, a sort order attribute. Now let us understand their relationship. So apparel size is having a relationship with this product. Now what is this symbol? If we go back, one or more. So one or more means a particular product can have multiple apparel sizes, or apparel sizes would be having multiple products. How would you read that relationship? We are having one or more relationship, that is for sure, but how you would read apparel size to product or product to apparel size? Consider the product as a t-shirt. So t-shirt can be available in different sizes: small, medium, large, large, extra large. So how you would read it? One to many relationship. A product can have multiple apparel size, or apparel size can have multiple products.
A product can have a multiple apparel size.
Yes, absolutely. So depending on the uniqueness of the entity, you need to decide what to put where, whether you should put it from top to bottom, the relationship, or bottom to top. If you change this thing to this thing, the meaning would be different. So you need to be very careful when you are identifying and defining this entity relationship diagram. So these symbols that you see are very crucial, and depending on this only, the development team sets the relationship for the entire application. Next, we come to keys in database. What are keys in database? So key is something that is unique in nature, that identify a particular record. So these are our record, the SCN 065541110. So these rows are called as records in a particular database terminology, and these are particular columns: SCN, forename, surname, tutor, date of birth, gender. Now in this example, we use SCN as a key because it uniquely identifies a particular record. So if you consider these particular column, the forename and the surname, they are bound to be duplicated. The tutor can be duplicated. There could be a person, I mean two-person having the same date of birth. Now gender is something that would be duplicated anyway. Now what is the unique thing that we are having over here? So unique thing is SCN. This is a unique column that we have. Now keys are always created on the unique column of any particular record. So these lines are nothing but record. So whenever you want to define a key in a database, you need to first identify which column is the most unique column, wherein there are no chances of information being repeated. That would be your unique thing or a candidate eligible for defining a key in database. Now there are different types of keys in databases. The very first key is candidate key. Now here if you see, we have different columns: employee number, forename, surname, department, and email ID. Now here, if we had to define the uniqueness of this particular table, employee table, so which are the unique columns that you see? The employee number, very first thing. Don't you think email address is also a unique column, wherein the email address cannot be same for two different employees? It cannot be same for two different employees. Every employee would be having a unique email address. Now candidate key is a key which is potential candidate for becoming, or describes the uniqueness of a particular column. Which is the unique column? Those columns are called as candidate key. So every table can have multiple candidates key or multiple unique columns. Okay. So in this example, employee number and email addresses are candidate key because they both can uniquely identify the employee record in that particular table. So if I had to query in SQL Server, okay, find me the details of employee with employee number 1034. So it would return me this address. If I query in SQL Server like find me the details of employee with email address this particular thing, so it will return me this particular record. Now same thing, if I query in SQL Server find me employee with employee details with department sales, so sales department would be having multiple employees, so SQL would return me multiple record because sales is not a unique thing. Same thing goes for surname. Surname cannot be unique. Multiple people would be having the same surname. The only unique thing that you could see over here is employee number and email address, basis on which you could get a unique constraint on a particular table. So whichever whichever column you find as unique in nature are the candidate keys in that particular table, and that table can have multiple unique identity in that particular given entity. An entity is nothing but a particular table. In our case, employee is an entity, and these are employee attributes or property: employee number, name, surname, department, and email. What could be one more unique thing that you could add over here? Can anyone guess? Apart from employee number and email, there is one more thing which is unique when it comes to this particular given situation.
Surname?
How surname would be unique? We can have employee with same surname as well. It is not in this particular example. I'm asking you to guess it.
Username?
Yes, username can be unique. Apart from that, phone number can be unique. Two employees cannot have same phone number. So these things would go as candidate key. Now what are primary key? Now in order to become a primary key, the key has to first become a candidate key. Primary key has to be derived out of candidate key only. It shouldn't be something that you define the primary key first and then identify the candidate key. You would first identify the candidate key and then you would decide on the primary key. So primary key is nothing but a candidate key which is chosen to be used. Now how candidate key is chosen? Candidate key is like you define which are the columns that are unique in nature. Now after you have decided which are the columns that are unique in nature, you understand or you tend to explore more that which is the most unique column in that, or which is the most unique thing basis on which we should be able to build a primary key. For example, in this context, even though email address is unique, but the more reliable option for a primary key is employee number, because when we are referring this particular employee number to a different table, it is very easy for us to fire query rather than email address, because this is a number and we can fire a query very frequently with the help of number, or for that matter a GUID ID, global unique identifier, that is automatically created in our database system, which is unique in nature. So always primary keys are enforced or selected based on the most unique thing that you see in a particular database table. Now here in our example, we have manually defined the employee number over here, but in actual scenario, we need not to define anything manually. There is a data type available in SQL Server called as GUID, Global Unique Identifier. It auto-generates the number in alphanumeric characters that serves as primary key for that particular table. Or for that matter, what people used to do in earlier times, they used to create an identity column wherein a identity is enforced in a particular column, and that particular column is to serve as primary key. So primary key important criteria is it has to be a candidate key, and out of multiple candidate key, whichever is the most suitable, whichever is the most appealing aspect in a perspective to define a uniqueness, that would serve as primary key. Then comes compound key. Now what is compound key? Now there are certain scenarios wherein in some table one column can act as primary key, and that a combination of columns are required to create that particular primary key. Now when we create a primary key with the help of multiple columns, that is called as compound key. Now if you have ever applied to a particular companies, I don't know whether all the companies follow the same process or not. I'm talking about Accenture, to be very specific. Now what they do, they authenticate the uniqueness of a candidate who is applying for a job post with the help of name, email address, and their phone number. Now in a given application, if you have entered these three information, and let's say you have submitted a job application to them and they screen you, and after that for some reason your process is not completed, and you are the system auto archives your application. Now what people do in this situation, they tend to change their email address. Now the system is smart enough, or they have created a compound key in such a way that they have created a combination from name, email address, and phone number. Out of this, if any of the information is matching in that particular table, then it would be treated as duplicate. So in first scenario, the candidate gives his name, email address, and phone number. In second scenario, the candidate changes the email address. However, name and phone number is same. So what Accenture database does, it doesn't accept the application. In third scenario, what people do, they keep the name and email address same and change the phone number. Then also the application doesn't accept the application. Why it happens so? Because they have created a compound key. They have defined a uniqueness considering the name, the email address, and the phone number. Out of this, if anyone is duplicated, it won't consider that particular thing as unique, and it would treat it as duplicate record. So irrespective of you have a different name or different email address, if the phone number is same, it would be considered as duplicate record. So compound key helps us to enforce additional what I would say integrity in terms of redund reducing redundant information. So we put a primary key kind of thing, but with the help of two record, not one record. Here we are creating a primary key with order ID and product ID. Then comes surrogate key. Now, what is a surrogate key? So it's a special key which has no meaning or purpose other than to uniquely identify each record. So if you consider this particular table, we have for name, surname, start name, and end name. And if you consider this particular table, we have person ID, name, surname, start time, and end time. Now, why we have created this person ID over here? So it's a surrogate key. Surrogate key is in, this is just for improving the particular process. It has no value as such. Just to create some uniqueness, we have temporarily introduced this particular column. So that is the purpose of surrogate key. It doesn't enforces any uniqueness as such or any value as such to the end customer or to the application itself, but just to simplify the process, we create that surrogate key. Then comes foreign key. Now, foreign key are always used in collaboration with primary key. For example, you create a student table wherein you create a student ID. Now you want to create a student address. Now, before creating student address, you need to refer to that student ID. So student ID, student table would be having student ID as primary key, and that student ID would be connected to the address table as foreign key, wherein the references would be mapped to the respective addresses. For example, if you see department code 01234, whatever it is, the name, whatever subject it is, and the telephone exchange. And then we have a teacher ID, the forename, the surname, and the qualification associated to it. But there is no way to see which teacher works in which department. So these are two independent tables. Here we cannot see which teacher works in which department. So what would be the solution? The solution would be to create a foreign key. So foreign key is like, we had the table department code, name, telephone exchange, and we created a reference of this particular department code in the teacher table. So this particular table that has been newly introduced in this particular teacher table is nothing but your foreign key that you took from this particular table, department table. So for department table, department code is a primary key, and when it is referenced in teacher table, it becomes foreign key for teacher table, not for department table. For department table, it's still the primary key, but when it is referenced in teacher table, it becomes foreign key for teacher table. So these are possible scenarios or the way by which we develop the keys in a particular databases. So this is how we represent the different things. We represent primary keys by underline. We represent foreign keys by underline and a star in plain textual requirements. Now, next concept when it comes uh, when we consider database designing is normalization. Now, why we do normalization at the first place? So normalization is the process of analyzing the relationship scheme based on the FDs and primary keys to achieve the desirable properties of minimizing redundancy and minimizing the insertion, deletion, and update anomalies. Now, what is the objective of normalization in database? So the core objective of normalization in databases is minimizing redundancy. Now, what is minimizing redundancy? So like we saw, there are multiple scenarios wherein we felt that the information is being repeated. So in those scenarios, we would be using normalization to eliminate those repetitive or duplicate information. So we would be using some of the techniques in database itself which would eliminate this redundant information. And the second objective of normalization is to minimize the insertion, deletion, and updation anomalies. The way we update, insert, or delete information that is also an objective to improve those operation with the help of normalization. So this is completely based on the functional dependencies or FDs and the primary keys that we enforce in a particular database. So normalization are typically in these forms. It could be in first normal form, second normal form, third normal form, Boyce code normal form, fourth, fifth till nth normal form. So we can apply normalization to nth level. So we start with first normalization form and it can reach to any XYZ normalization form depending on how and what we do to meet these two objectives. Now you need not to know in detail about normalization because this is a practice that the developers follow or the SQL developers follow. We would cover normalization at a very high level just to have a basic understanding around what is normalization. If given a situation tomorrow, someone asks you or there is a discussion that you are part of wherein they talk about normalization, you are aware about what they are talking about. Now this is an example of first normalization form. Now, first normalization states that the domain of an attribute must include only atomic, that is simple, indivisible, and the values of any attribute in a tuple must have single value. Now, if you see the department name, there are two departments over here, research, sorry, research and head. Then we have the department number 51. Then we have the department ID 100, 400. And then we have department location A, B, C, E. Now research department is located at location A, B, and C, and the head of that particular department is located at location E. So do you think this is the right way of representation of the information in a particular table? We cannot club multiple things in one particular record, right? We have to separate out those records. So how do we simplify this? We would be creating different research item over here with the same department number and the same department ID. We would split it out ABC to ABC, and then we have head. This is a typo, ideally it should be head. Then we have the head 1, 400 and E. So this is how we did the first normalization. So here we have simplified the process. Instead of having multiple information in same particular record, we have created multiple records and we have simplified that particular table. Now what happens in second normal form? So it is completely based on the functional dependency. Table must be in the first normal form. So the very important aspect when it comes to second normal form is that the table has to be first in first normal form. And then we have to remove the vertical redundancy. The same value should not be repeated across row. And then we have to have the composite keys wherein all columns in a row must refer to both part of the keys. So benefits would be increased storage efficiency and less data repetition. So if you see here, we have a international standard book number and we have a title, we have a number of pages, and then we have the publisher ID. So do you think this information, the way it is represented, is fair enough? No, we have to document them in separate tables wherein we document the ISBN number and the publisher ID. Then we document the title and the pages so that if someone searches based on a book title, this table refers or provides them information about that particular title. If someone searches for a publisher, this publisher ID would locate to the publisher table, and from there the information would be given to that particular customer. So if these two would have been in one single table, it would have created unnecessary complexities in terms of searching that particular information. So that's the reason why we separated this set of information into two different tables. So that is an example of second normal form. Then comes the third normal form. Again, the prerequisite is it has to be in the second normal form. And if your table is in second normal form, then there are good chances it is in the third normal form. And all columns must be related directly to the primary key. For example, this is a table wherein we have the author, the book name, the ISBN number, and where the book is printed. And then we divide that particular table into two different parts: the author, the book name, and then ISBN and printed. So second normal form is very much similar to third normal form. Only thing is that it needs a little bit polishing on that particular part. Now then there is something called as denormalization. Now before moving into denormalization, there are other forms of normalization as well. Apart from third normal form, there is Boyce code normalization form, there is fourth normalization, fifth normalization, till nth normalization. But I don't think we should spend mm, more time on this particular part, because this is something consideration for the development team or the SQL developers, nothing that a BA should know more about. This much information is sufficient. Now, what is denormalization? Now, denormalization is a process which is reverse process of normalization. In normalization, we reduce the redundancy, but in denormalization, we increase the redundancy in the database. So it is the opposite process of normalization, and it is done for improving the performance. If there are any performance constraint, then we do a denormalization of the databases. Now, it can be considered as a strategy that the database managers use to increase the performance of a database structure. So if you see this particular example, this is a normalized database. This is an email messaging service example, wherein we have the user, which have a user ID, the email ID, then we have the name, first name and last name of that particular email user. We have all the messages coming from that particular email addresses with the user IDs and the message ID who is sending the emails to them and what is their message subject line. Then we have the messages, individual message ID would be there, their subject would be there, their text would be there. Now when we denormalize it, we are adding a particular attribute, that is users received count, which would essentially show how much email has been received so far, in order to improve the particular performance of that email messaging service. For example, if you are using Outlook, it doesn't store all your email messages from last 1 year. It would essentially store only the first 100 message or the latest 100 message. Why? Because it wants to improve its performance. Unnecessary storage in your hard disk or your local drive, it doesn't make any sense. So what they do, they count the message, only the latest 100 message would be stored. Now when they are counting this message, that ultimately doesn't add any value to this column. It is just to improve the performance. So that is the ideology behind denormalizing a particular database, to improve the performance. We cannot store unnecessary information, but how do we handle those unnecessary information storage or reducing that particular space when it comes to storing your local old emails in your local drive or database? By only selecting the most 100 updated email addresses. So that is the way how you apply denormalization. Okay, any questions, anyone, so far? Now when we apply structured query language for database, we need to consider some of the things. Now, what is structured query language? So it's a language for storing, manipulating, and retrieving information that are stored in a relation databases. Now we have identified the entities, we have defined the relations amongst the entity. Now it's time to store, manipulate, retrieve information in that particular database. So we have certain SQL commands for doing that in a particular relational database context, like we have create, select, insert, and update statement along with delete and drop statement that would help us manipulate and retrieve information in a in a particular database. Now this databases can be in the form of can use Microsoft SQL Server, IBM DB2, Oracle, MySQL. or can be used in access as well. So these are the categories in SQL command. We have data definition language called as DDL. We have data manipulation language called as DAML. We have data query language called as DQL, followed by DCL, that is data control language. Then there are data administration command and transaction control command. Now, if we consider defining a database structure, then we mostly go with DDL commands, that is data definition language. So here we have the create table command, alter table command, drop table command, and if there are any indexes, then we have those indexing commands as well, creating an index, altering, dropping, or creating a particular view for that particular table. Then when it comes to manipulating the information, then we have data manipulation language or DML, wherein we insert, update, delete, and drop a different uh, uh, set of information in a particular table. Then for selecting a particular set of information, we use the select command. For data control language, we have these commands like alteration of a particular password, granting a particular access, revoking a particular access, anything that deals with controlling a set of entities information. We use data control language. Then we have data administration command, which is used by your DBA guys, who essentially deals with auditing a particular process or a particular set of queries or information, starting and stopping and auditing. Then we have transaction control command, wherein we use commit statements, rollback statement, save point, set transaction to do all the transaction level manipulation for SQL. Now it's time to do some hands-on. We would be using SQL Server 2017 Express version, which is free of cost. You can download it there. So we would be creating a simple table. Now in order to create a simple table, we would be using this command, use master. To create a table, we would be using create table name. Let's say we create a table as VSI and we would execute it. Sorry, before creating a table, we need to create a database. Sorry, we'll first create a database. Okay, a database is created. Now we need to see whether it has been actually created or not. We would right click it and click on refresh. So VSI database is created for us. Now in that particular VSI database, we would be creating our table. For example, let's say we create a table. Let us give that particular table name as student. Okay. Now in that particular student table, we would be defining the columns. So what is the unique thing that you feel for a student table? Student ID would be unique. Now this ID would always be in the form of integer. After that, we would be creating this particular student ID as primary key. So we would be writing primary key keyword over here. Then we need to define the identity. Now how we would be defining the identity? So identity is a unique number that would be generated for student ID. Let's say we create an identity of 1000, 1. So how the information would look like? the information would start from 1000. After that, when we enter the second record, it would be 1002, followed by 1003, 4, and so on. So it would start from 1000 and it would keep on incrementing with 1. So it would be adding up 1 plus 1 and so on for different records. Now after that, we would be needing a first name. Now let's say the data char, we define it as n varchar with length as 50, and we would mention it as not null. Now why we are using not null over here? We are using not null because this cannot be empty. This is a mandatory field. First name cannot be empty. For that reason, we would be using not null. Then we need a last name. Now last name can be also uh, n varchar, uh, or we can use n varchar as well. Now, does anyone recollect what's the difference between n varchar and varchar? Probably studied somewhere.
So varchar is fixed number and n varchar it uses the actual space that is used. Like if it's 50, it won't use 50, but the number of amount of bytes that are used by the first name.
Okay, any other difference?
So it's kind of a space space utilization is good. It's the efficient.
Okay, anyone else want to try that? Okay, can anyone tell me why I use this square bracket for create date? Answers please. Why I use the square bracket? Okay, if you see this thing, the column names, there is no space in between. First name, it's a single word. Last name, it's a single word. Now when I wrote create date, there is a space in between. That is a hint. Okay. Now here you could see, depending on the identity, it started with 1000. Now if I add one more record like this and execute this particular thing, let's say I change this thing, it would give me the number as 1001. So similarly, if I add this particular thing, one more record, it would start incrementing it to 1002. So that's the reason why we use identity constraint over here along with the primary key. Now similarly, if we go on adding GUID item in this particular primary key, so no need to increment it, rather it would generate a system generated key for it. So it won't be in this particular format 1001, 1002 or something. It would be a alphanumeric character that would be generated by system itself, who would maintain the uh, integrity sorry would maintain the identity of that particular record. What is the next set of operation that you can perform in a particular table? So obviously you could be using operation like updating a table in SQL Server. So how you would go about updating a table? So let's say we want to update a particular table. So we would be using the update column like this. Update table name, that is student, where first name, before that we would set it. Update student set first name equals XYZ in single quotes, followed by a where clause, student ID. We would perform this operation on a primary key. Let's say I want to update it for ID number 1003. Now 1003 must be updated to XYZ. Same thing if I want to do it as PQR for ID number 1004. So this ID would get updated by PQR. So this way we can do some update part. So this is creation part where we create a table. This is retrieving part where we select a particular table, and this is update part, that is sorry uh, update query that we saw, wherein we update a particular table. Now what is deleting a particular table? So deleting is nothing but you are deleting a specific record in a particular table. Now how deleting would look like in SQL? So let's say you are want to delete the record number 1003. So you would be writing query as delete from whatever is the table name, that is student, where student ID is equal to 1003. Sorry, student ID. Now if we select it, you would see 1003 is deleted. So these are the four basic operations that we do as a business analyst, or for that matter any person who is aware of SQL when dealing with CRUD operation. CRUD, creating, that is creating a particular table and inserting a record, retrieving using the select star statement, updating using update statement, and deleting using delete statement. Depending on this, you can create n number of tables or entities with their attributes, and this is how things look like. Any questions, anyone? By the way, this SQL Server Express is freely available. You can download it. Supporting to this SQL Server Express, there is an AdventureWorks database that is freely available. You can download that as well. All the download links are given in that particular